watch number 1, number 2, and number 3, you see it all diffused out.
Because I played 2 parts.
The Lord of the Rings. The Return of the King took the world and box office by storm in 2003. This modern classic closes off the epic The Lord of the Rings trilogy. It is the first and only fantasy film ever to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. Spotting all the hidden details and Easter eggs isn't easy when there is so much going on within the film, but this movie has plenty of them. So if you are out on an adventure, looking for some The Lord of the Rings hidden facts, look no further. In this video, we will reveal 20 weird facts you might not have known about The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Number 20. The cast trained like real warriors. There was a lot of training before the film was produced. When Peter Jackson wanted to start filming The Lord of the Rings, he sent his cast members to a training camp. This wasn't a short workshop or a couple of fight rehearsals. It was a complete program where the cast members got trained for 6 weeks before filming. They learned how to sword fight, ride horses, row boats, and even hike together in New Zealand. It might sound extreme, but Jackson believed the friendships and trust the actors built during training would carry over to the screen. And he was absolutely right. This was also a chance for them to bond and to get accustomed to living in New Zealand before filming began. Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn, took sword training seriously. The other actors, Orlando Bloom, Elijah Wood, and Sean Astin, all underwent the training and learned how to handle weapons and move like warriors. They weren't only training their bodies, they were building loyalty and brotherhood, the same qualities Tolkien wrote about in his books. By the time they began shooting The Return of the King, the actors weren't just acting, they displayed fundamental life-fighting skills. They also bonded and became a tight-knit group, just as the movie portrayed. You can feel it in every scene, especially in how Aragorn inspires his friends before the Black Gate, how Frodo and Sam cling to each other on Mount Doom, and how Merry and Pippin stick together no matter what. That's not only acting, it's the product of weeks of shared struggle. It's weird to think Hollywood stars would actually go through the stress of training, but it's that training that gave the film its heart. Without it, the battles may have looked staged, and the friendships might have looked forced. So we can say that the training the cast members underwent made The Lord of the Rings look more real. Number 19. The actors in The Fellowship got the same tattoos. After shooting the film and all that time together on set, the actors who played Fellowship decided to commemorate things. 8 of the 9 cast members got matching tattoos to remember the journey. The design of the tattoo was the Elvish symbol for the number 9, representing the 9 members of the Fellowship of the Ring. The actors' names got the tattoo: Elijah Wood, Viggo Mortensen, Orlando Bloom, Sean Bean, Sean Astin, Dominic Monaghan, Billy Boyd, and Ian McKellen. Here's where it gets weird. The 9th member, John Rhys Davies, who played Gimli, declined to get the tattoo. He hated sitting for long hours, so the idea of sitting to get a tattoo, plus the pain, made him uninterested. Instead, his stunt double, Brett Beatty, stepped in and got the tattoo on his behalf. So all 9 members were still covered. It was their way of saying their bond would last forever, even though the films would end. The tattoos were done in Wellington, New Zealand, and each actor chose where on their body to place it. For example, Elijah Wood was on his hip, while Orlando Bloom's was on his arm. It is strange that they never really told anyone about it while filming. It wasn't until after the movie's wrap that the story became public, and fans realized how deep the bond had grown between the actors. It is rare to hear that Hollywood casts doing something this permanent because of one film, but these tattoos proved that the Fellowship had a real connection that didn't just end on the screen. That little Elvish symbol on each of them is proof of that, making the story of the Return of the King even more powerful. Number 18. Peter Jackson's pirate cameo. Some directors often sneak themselves into their movies, and Peter Jackson carried out this special habit in The Lord of the Rings. He appears in all 3 films in different disguises. In The Return of the King, his cameo is one of the strangest and most fun. You can see him on the Corsair ship, standing among the pirates about to attack. The camera doesn't linger, but once you know where to look, you'll notice that the man with a dark beard and pirate outfit is the director himself. The funny part is that Jackson filmed a fight scene for this famous cameo. When he and the others took the ship, Aragorn was supposed to kill him on screen. But in the theatrical cut, that moment never made it. Instead, we get a quick shot of Jackson glaring like a pirate, and the battle skips forward. Fans had to wait until the extended edition to see more of that sequence. Jackson later admitted he enjoyed sneaking into his films because it connected him to the cast and crew. It also became a private joke. In The Fellowship of the Ring, he appeared munching a carrot in Bree. In The Two Towers, he was seen throwing a spear at Helm's Deep. And in The Return of the King, he went complete pirate. It's weird because most directors prefer to stay behind the camera, but Jackson loved joining the adventure, even if it meant dressing in ridiculous costumes. Spotting his cameos has since become a game for fans, and his pirate role remains one of the trilogy's most talked about Easter eggs. Number 17. The closing credits had sketched portraits of the cast. The closing credits of The Return of the King differ from what we usually see in other movies. Instead of scrolling names with plain text, they have sketched portraits of the cast that change into their real photographs. It feels personal, almost like a storybook closing its final chapter. But the interesting part about this is that it wasn't planned initially. The idea actually came from Ian McKellen, who played Gandalf. McKellen suggested that the ending credits should reflect the artistry of the world they had built. He wanted it to feel like the actors were honored as much as their characters. Peter Jackson loved the idea and took it straight to Alan Lee, the film's production designer. Alan Lee, along with fellow artist John Howe, had been shaping the look of Middle-earth from the very beginning. Lee's sketches of the cast became the final memory audiences carried out of the theater. This task took the artist some time because every portrait had to capture the actor's likeness and the character's personality. Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn had a regal but weary look. Elijah Wood's Frodo seemed fragile yet brave. Even the Hobbit's sketches carried warmth. Fans liked the credit sequence. Many said it made the ending even more emotional because it reminded them how much love and work went into the trilogy. All this happened because McKellen had a spark of inspiration. Without that suggestion, The Return of the King might have ended on simple text, but instead, it closed with art worthy of Tolkien himself. Number 16. Shelob's scene was moved from the second book. A significant scene in The Return of the King was not from the third book, as it should have been. It was moved from the second book. Most people don't know, but if you're a book fan, you probably must have noticed this one. In Tolkien's novels, Frodo's terrifying encounter with Shelob the giant spider happens in The Two Towers, the second book. However, when Peter Jackson adapted the book into a film, he shifted that scene into The Return of the King. At first glance, it may look like a small change, but it actually reshaped the timeline of the whole trilogy. Why did he make such a massive alteration? Jackson moved the scene into the third film because he felt that ending The Two Towers with Shelob would steal too much attention from the Battle of Helm's Deep, which was already one of the most complex battle scenes ever filmed. He also wanted The Return of the King to show Frodo's most profound moment of weakness and Sam's ultimate act of loyalty. Placing Shelob's attack in the final film gave the story more emotional weight. Think about it. If Shelob had appeared earlier, Frodo's capture and Sam's rescue would have been resolved before the big finale. By holding it back, Jackson increased the tension and gave Sam his most heroic moment right before the grand conclusion. It also gave audiences a shocking break from the massive battle sequences. When you think the film can't get any more intense, Frodo becomes paralyzed, trapped in a web, and dragged away. Thankfully, it didn't significantly change the storyline, and most viewers agreed it worked brilliantly on screen. It made Frodo being attacked by Shelob, the giant spider, a scene that filled the viewers with suspense until the very end. That slight adjustment made Frodo's suffering feel much more urgent. It's a weird example of how changing one scene from the books strengthened the movie. Number 15. Frodo and Sam's fight wasn't in the book. Fans of the Tolkien novels may have noticed something unusual in The Return of the King. Frodo and Sam are the most loyal pair in the story, but they actually argue and part ways in the film. This doesn't happen in Tolkien's book at all. Peter Jackson and his writing team added the scene where Frodo tells Sam to leave after Gollum tricks him into believing Sam ate the lembas bread. The reason that scene was modified was to add more emotional conflict. On screen, this moment feels shocking. This is the same Sam who has stood by Frodo from the Shire through Mordor, and suddenly Frodo is telling him to go home. That alone is so heartbreaking, and even the viewers feel Sam's disappointment at that moment. But the scene works because it highlights how heavy the ring's burden had become. Frodo is consumed by mistrust, but surprisingly, the loyal Sam still comes back to save Frodo from Shelob's lair. Audiences sigh with relief, and Sam's loyalty comes across as heroic and unshakable. The change in the scene also deepened Gollum's role. Jackson gave him more power as a villain by making him the manipulative force who turns Frodo against Sam. Gollum wasn't just creepy anymore. He actively caused the separation of the two friends. This invented fight might not have been in the book, but it carries the tension the film needed. It captures the pain, doubt, and trust that make their friendship one of the greatest in movie history. Number 14. Shelob's creepy face was chosen by kids. Shelob is one of the scariest creatures in the entire trilogy. Her body was modeled on a New Zealand tunnel web spider, but her face came from an unusual source. Peter Jackson asked his children what kind of spider face scared them the most, and their answer helped design Shelob's terrifying head. How weird kids' fears shaped one of the most nightmarish monsters in cinema history. Jackson already hated spiders, so he wanted Shelob to be as horrifying as possible. The effects team at Weta Workshop built a body that felt slimy, powerful, and ancient. But when it came to her face, Jackson trusted his children to guide him. They looked at different sketches and picked the creepiest one. That design became the Shelob we all know. Its giant eyes, fangs, and drooling mouth made it scary. The attack scene was filmed with a mix of practical effects and computer-generated imagery. Elijah Wood acted against props and green screens, but the close-ups of Shelob lunging, drooling, and wrapping Frodo in webbing came straight from those child-inspired designs. Even people who aren't afraid of spiders admit that Shelob is enough to give them nightmares. It's funny to think such a gruesome design started with kids helping out their dad, but it worked. Shelob remains one of the most unforgettable movie monsters ever put on screen, and it all began with a director asking his children a simple question: which one looks the scariest? Number 13. Battle at the Black Gate was shot in a military training ground. The filming of the battle at the Black Gate in The Return of the King has one of the most dangerous behind-the-scenes stories. The scene where Aragorn's army attacks the Black Gate was shot in New Zealand's Rangpo Desert. Most people didn't know then that this location was once a military training ground. That meant the field was littered with mines and other bombs that had not been detonated and were buried beneath the sand. The production team had to sweep with metal detectors to ensure everyone was safe to film, and actors were warned to stay within certain safe zones. But Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn, was known for throwing himself into battle scenes with total commitment. While filming on horseback, he charged outside the marked area. Crew members panicked, fearing he might set off an old explosive. Fortunately, nothing happened, but the risk was very real. Peter Jackson later said this was one of the scariest moments of the entire shoot. They had thousands of extras, horses, and stunt performers on location, so the danger wasn't only for Mortensen. Any wrong step could have caused a disaster for the whole production team. That real danger adds another layer to Aragorn's big speech before the Black Gate. As Mortensen shouted, "For Frodo!" and led the charge, he wasn't just acting bravely, he had already shown reckless courage off camera. Knowing he nearly set off live bombs makes that scene even more intense. It's one of those behind-the-scenes stories that feels unbelievable, but it's true. The Return of the King almost had a very different ending thanks to real-world danger hidden in the ground of Middle-earth. Number 12. Filming continued even after the Oscars. Most movies finish shooting months, sometimes years, before they ever reach theaters. But The Return of the King was a different story. Even after the film premiered, swept the box office, and won its record-breaking 11 Oscars, Peter Jackson and his crew returned to film extra scenes. One of the strangest examples was the avalanche of skulls in the Paths of the Dead. That creepy, unforgettable shot wasn't filmed until 2004, long after the movie had already been crowned Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Jackson wanted to enhance the film's extended edition, as he felt the sequence of Aragorn finding the army of the Dead wasn't as detailed as he would like. So, a few months after the trilogy was released, he gathered the crew and actors again. The result was the bone-chilling wave of skulls that crashed down on Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. It's rare enough for movies to add scenes after release, but it's practically unheard of for a Best Picture winner. Jackson treated The Return of the King as a living project, always willing to improve and expand on it. His perfectionism meant audiences got one of the richest extended editions ever made. This also explains why fans often say the extended edition feels like the true version of the film. Those late editions, filmed when the trilogy had already made history, gave audiences even more of Middle-earth to explore. It's weird to imagine Oscar statues sitting in Jackson's office while still directing actors, but that's precisely what happened. Only The Return of the King could break records at the Oscars and still be unfinished in the eyes of its director. Number 11. 2. One rings were secretly given away. Here's a fun and slightly awkward story from the end of filming. When production wrapped on The Return of the King, Peter Jackson wanted to give his cast special gifts. Elijah Wood, who played Frodo, received one of the prop versions of the One Ring. He was told it was the only one. That's a pretty incredible keepsake, right? The problem is that Andy Serkis, who played Gollum, was given the same gift and told that the ring he received was the only one. Both actors went home thinking they possessed the one true ring of power. Imagine the confusion when they later discovered that there were actually two. It's almost like a prank straight out of Tolkien's world. Gollum spent the entire story obsessed with the ring, and then, in real life, Serkis was given one too. Frodo carried the ring across Middle-earth, and in real life, Wood thought he had the only ring. This strange little mix-up makes the whole story even funnier. Neither actor was upset, but fans often joke that 2 One Rings are now out in the world. It's a perfect example of how much Jackson valued his actors. He wanted them each to carry a piece of the story forever. The props are priceless for collectors, but for Wood and Serkis, the emotional value is even greater. The rings were given to them as a reminder of their contribution to the film's success. And in a weird twist, Frodo and Gollum kept their precious gifts. Number 10. Denethor's demise was worse. In the movies, one of the most shocking scenes in The Return of the King is the fiery demise of Denethor, the steward of Gondor. Denethor's demise played out much better in the original books. First introduced in The Return of the King, Denethor is the ruling steward of Gondor, and while not as far gone as Saruman or the worm-tongued whispered king of Rohan, Denethor's use of a palantir allows Sauron's dark influence to creep in. This corruption leaves Denethor disenchanted and unwilling to fight, although his commitment to Gondor remains steadfast. The imminent arrival of the true successor to the throne and the grief of losing his son, Boromir, add further strain to an already weathered Denethor, pushing him into the clutches of madness. The characterization of Denethor, portrayed by John Noble in Peter Jackson's movie adaptation of The Return of the King, is altered somewhat from the books. On screen, the steward is more outwardly evil, working against Gandalf and the Fellowship out of spite, rather than falling into despair and hopelessness, as he does in Tolkien's original novels. Another aspect of Denethor's story Jackson changes is his death scene. In both versions of The Lord of the Rings, a deeply troubled Denethor wrongly believes his second son, Faramir, is on the verge of death and prepares a pyre to lay himself and his son to rest. This is where the film and book take diverging paths. Originally, Tolkien wrote that the maddened Denethor set himself and Faramir upon the flames, but the latter was rescued thanks to Gandalf and Beregond, who pulled him free before the fire took hold. Denethor remained on the pyre and was killed of his own volition. In Peter Jackson's movie trilogy, Gandalf confronts Denethor and knocks him clean off the lit pyre with a lance, allowing Pippin to get Faramir safely. Denethor attacks the Hobbit, so Gandalf has Shadowfax kick Denethor back onto the pyre, where the steward sees his stirring son and experiences a rare moment of clarity. The audience then sees a flaming Denethor, who is in considerable pain, run to the edge of Minas Tirith, an impressive distance for someone fully engulfed in flames, and then throws himself off the edge. In some ways, it's easy to see why Jackson made the changes he did. Denethor's on-screen demise allows for a more action-oriented sequence where Gandalf gets to knock the bad guy about and Pippin can play the hero. Number 9. Women rode into battle with fake beards. Peter Jackson needed hundreds of riders to charge across the fields for the massive battle sequences in The Return of the King, but he encountered one problem. There weren't enough skilled male riders available in New Zealand, so he devised an unusual but brilliant solution. He decided to cast women as soldiers too. Yes, many of the soldiers you see on horseback were women wearing fake beards. These riders were often experienced horsewomen, which made them safer and more reliable for such dangerous shots. The props team gave them wigs, armor, and carefully glued beards, so they blended into the armies of Gondor and Rohan. You would never guess that half the charging soldiers were women on screen. This choice also added to the realism. The battles looked larger and more chaotic because there were enough riders to fill the frame. The army scenes might have looked thin and unconvincing without these disguised horsewomen. For the actresses, it was a unique experience. Many later joked that they loved galloping into camera range with their fake beards flapping in the wind. Fans didn't know for years, but once the secret emerged, it became one of the most beloved behind-the-scenes facts. Number 8. The Gimli mask was burnt. John Rhys Davies, the actor who played Gimli, had one of the most challenging jobs in the entire trilogy. It wasn't just his height that the production had to change. They had to change how he looked too. He spent up to 5 hours a day putting on makeup for the role of Gimli in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was discovered early on that he was allergic to the prosthetics, so he could only put them on and work about every third day. The first week, it burned off the skin under his eyes, and before the filming wrapped up, the reaction had left his skin raw and sore. After filming, the makeup department gave him the Gimli mask and told him to do whatever he wanted. So what did he do? Without a second thought, Rhys Davies threw the mask into the fire. One of the makeup artists claimed they had never seen him move so fast as he threw it into a nearby fire. Number 7. The design of Mordor's orcs was changed. Before Peter Jackson began filming The Return of the King, he expressed dissatisfaction with the villain's look in the previous films. He thought the orcs of Mordor looked too weak compared to the Uruk-hai introduced in The Two Towers. The Uruk-hai were towering, muscular, and terrifying. The Mordor orcs, on the other hand, didn't look as threatening. In the Fellowship of the Ring and the Battle for Moria, the orcs had elongated noses and a more animalistic, classical, goblin-like appearance. So Jackson asked Weta Workshop to redesign them for the King's return. The new design made the orcs look more intimidating. They included Gothmog, the horribly disfigured general who leads the attack on Minas Tirith. He also has a twisted face and limps when he walks, which adds to his gruesome look. The new designs weren't just cosmetic, they also gave the final battles more intensity. The audience immediately feels the danger when the camera cuts to lines of these monstrous soldiers snarling and charging. Without the redesigns, the Mordor army might have felt less menacing and the stakes lower. The work from Weta was so detailed that each orc mask had unique scars, deformities, and textures. Most of these faces flashed on screen briefly, but the details made them suitable for close-up shots during the larger battles. Strangely, the villains were upgraded midway through the trilogy, but it worked. By the time Gondor was under siege, Mordor looked like a nightmare come to life. Those redesigned orcs gave the heroes a more terrifying enemy, and audiences a final battle worthy of Tolkien's epic ending. Number 6. The New Zealand army was used as extras.
Happens. Stay with me.
This day we fight!
The final war at the Black Gate is one of the most epic moments in The Return of the King. Aragorn and his army ride out against Sauron's endless legions, and it looks like thousands of men are standing shoulder to shoulder. But here's the surprising truth. The filmmakers had to use around 100 extras on set for that scene. To get enough extras for the battle at the Black Gate, a few hundred members of the New Zealand army were brought in. They apparently were so enthusiastic during the battle scenes that they kept breaking the wooden swords and spears they were given. Number 5. David Wenham was safely rigged for the dragging scene. There's a scene in The Return of the King where Faramir is unconscious and badly wounded, and is being dragged back to Minas Tirith by his horse. To film that scene, precaution was the watchword. The image of his limp body tied to the saddle is heartbreaking, but behind the camera, it was also one of the trickiest stunts to film. The risk was that David Wenham could have been seriously injured if the horse had run independently. So what did they do to keep him safe? The crew designed a custom release system built right into the saddle. Wenham held a small handle that acted as a safety switch. If the horse ran too fast or veered off at any point, he could simply let go and be freed immediately. It was a clever piece of engineering that balanced safety with the real action. The production team didn't want to rely on a stunt double for every shot. Wenham wished to perform as much as possible because it helped him stay in character and deliver a more convincing performance. Having the emergency release gave everyone peace of mind. Luckily, the horse was well trained and calm throughout the shoot, so David didn't trigger the release system. However, it indicates that the dangerous and chaotic scene was shot without sacrificing the safety of its cast. Number 4. The Oliphant carcass was a physical prob. The dead Oliphant carcass that Legolas killed during the Battle of Minas Tirith was an incredibly impressive visual within The Return of the King. It is one that was actually built as a physical prop. Considering its size, it is pretty surprising that this isn't a computer-generated imagery effect, but Peter Jackson wanted it to be built. This was actually the largest prop ever built for a movie then, proving just how large it was in scale. However, Peter Jackson actually still thought this could have been even bigger. Number 3. Andy Serkis played 2 roles. Everyone knows Andy Serkis played the role of Gollum in the Lord of the Rings film trilogy. He is the actor who provided motion capture movements and voice for the animated character. But what most fans don't know is that he also appears in an unexpected role as a human in The Return of the King. In the flashback scene that shows how Smeagol became Gollum, it isn't just Serkis's voice and movements you're seeing. For once, that's actually his real face. He plays Smeagol before the ring corrupts him, a soft-spoken hobbit-like creature celebrating his birthday. When he discovers the ring and murders his friend Déagol, audiences see the terrifying moment when an ordinary person begins to twist into the creature we know as Gollum. This was important to Serkis and Jackson as they wanted to show the viewers that Gollum wasn't always a monster. He was once someone not so different from Frodo or Sam. Showing Serkis's actual face gave weight to that transformation, making Gollum's tragedy more human and heartbreaking. It's rare for an actor to bring such a character to life in 2 completely different ways in the same movie. Serkis used his body and expressions to create Gollum through technology and used raw acting skills to play Smeagol in person. The result is one of the most memorable dual performances in modern cinema. Number 2. The movie almost didn't happen. Return of the King may be the most successful film in the franchise, but Viggo Mortensen revealed that the film would never even have been released in theaters if it weren't for the success of The Fellowship of the Ring. Peter Jackson had finished the movie production in December 2000. He'd shot all 3 films in the trilogy, but the second and third ones were a mess. It was very sloppy and didn't look good at all. It needed massive reshoots, which the production team did year after year. But then Peter would have never been given the extra money to do The King's Return, which was the 3rd adaptation, if the first one hadn't been a huge success. Number 1. The movie won 11 Oscars, without losing one. The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King is arguably the best movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, perfectly wrapping up the story. It is one of the highest-grossing films in cinema history. The film stormed the Academy Awards like no other fantasy film ever had. It was nominated for 11 awards at the 2004 Oscars, sharing the world record for most Academy Awards received with Ben-Hur and Titanic. It won in all the categories and stood out because no other film in the fantasy genre had ever achieved such recognition. The categories ranged from Best Picture and Best Director to technical fields like Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Costume Design. The Return of the King was the first fantasy film to win Best Picture. Like the 2 previous films, The Return of the King was a significant box office success, grossing over $1 billion worldwide, making it the highest-grossing Middle-earth film out of all 6, and was the second highest-grossing film of all time at the time of its release. It was also the highest-grossing movie of 2003 and for New Line Cinema. The film became the highest-grossing movie for New Line's parent company, Time Warner, until Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was released in 2012. The Return of the King is the third Middle-earth film adaptation to be released and the sixth and final film chronologically. I want to hear from you. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Or do you know another behind-the-scenes secret worth sharing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notified when we update videos like this. Before you go, check out the video showing on your screen now.